Hello. Hi guys. Hope someone has joined. Some people will join, I'm sure. So, those who are joining for the first time in this series of discussions on Meenakshi Jain's paper, for them a basic introduction again, and I'll just wait until other people join as well. Let me check if the audio is coming fine. Hope it is. Hello. Yeah, audio seems to be coming fine, right? Okay. So this discussion is on a paper written by Dr. Meenakshi Jain, refuting all the narratives and the facts and the flawed narratives presented by Dr. Satish Chandra. Bhai, we are back. Nice. Everyone's back already. So थोड़ा basic introduction दे देते हैं for people who are maybe checking in for the first time. So and who will maybe stumble upon this video for the first time later on. So this paper is by Dr. Meenakshi Jain, refuting all the flawed narratives and the facts and the conclusions presented by Dr. Satish Chandra in his book Medieval History of India. Now, the history of this discourse between Meenakshi Jain and Satish Chandra is that when Atal Bihari Vajpayee came to power, they inserted Dr. Meenakshi Jain's book in the NCERT syllabus. Then a lot of court kacheri case happened. Marxist historians got their team together and fought to get Meenakshi Jain's book outside the syllabus. Then 6 years later, Dr. Satish Chandra's book was reinstated, and then Meenakshi Jain wrote a counter to that book in this paper. This is a 57-page paper. We are in the 37th page. We'll just 18, 19 pages left. We'll finish it now. And we are right now in the chapter where Dr. Meenakshi Jain is bringing out quotes from the book itself, where Satish Chandra is giving out hilarious facts, insane justifications for crazy nonsense, contradicting himself, contradicting things he wrote just in the previous page, etc. And then Meenakshi Jain is pointing those out, then giving her counters. Okay. So, okay, 7 people have joined. Let's start. We'll do just one paragraph of one point of recap. Just पिछले वाले पेज से हम start करते हैं. So the last point was Satish Chandra was saying that Akbar's Rajput policy was continued by his successors Jahangir and Shah Jahan. तो अकबर्स राजपूत पॉलिसी क्या था कि बहुत अच्छे रिलेशनशिप थे. Meenakshi Jain says to this that, again misleading, after recalling Man Singh from the governorship of Bengal, Jahangir did not appoint any Rajput as Subedar. Satish Chandra was saying that Akbar appointed so many Rajput soldiers, and everyone in the Mughal family kept appointing countless Hindu soldiers, etc. Shah Jahan appointed only 2 Rajput governors from a total of 152 such appointments made by him. A study of 172 appointments to the post of Faujdars made by them reveals that the Rajput share was a paltry 4. Similarly, only 14 out of 86 appointees to the post of Kiladars examined by scholars were Rajputs. Now notice the difference here, what we were discussing in the previous stream as well, that that earlier on, before the 1500s have arrived, that is, a lot of Hindus were being involved in the governance, okay, so which was being used by the Marxist historians to point out their secular nature. देखो हिंदुओं को नौकरी दे दिया, कितना अच्छा आदमी है, which is not the case, because since they had come from a barren land with no governance, they did not know how to run this place. सिर्फ मार के तो जगह ले लिया, अब चलाएगा कैसे देश. उसके लिए जिन लोगों को जो काम आता था उसमें उसको डालना पड़ा. तो काम किसको आता था हर चीज़ में? हिंदुओं को. जैसे कि पाकिस्तान में हमको दिख रहा है किसी को कुछ काम नहीं आता है, इसलिए हिंदुओं को काम देना पड़ा. अब 1500s में जाके हिंदुओं को काम नहीं मिल रहा है. क्यों? अब उन लोगों को काम पता चल गया है, या तो जो हिंदू को काम आता था वो खुद मुस्लिम बन गए हैं, खुशी है इसलिए. तो नाउ द हिंदू इन्वॉल्वमेंट इज डिक्रीजिंग इन द मुगल आर्मी, in the Mughal governance, so which was their intention all along. But पहले मिल नहीं रहा था कोई काम करने को, इसलिए दे रहे थे, not because of secularism. Okay, some interesting thing has been said by Afin. He's saying that, dude, before you start, what do you think about that Gorgo case I told you before? Do you think he's getting money from Jamatis of Bangladesh, or are they just copying the Periyarites? I think he's just copying the Periyarites, because he's a big neurosurgeon doctor. I think he has plenty of money, and he's plenty intelligent. His brain IQ and all is pretty great. Knowledge, information retaining power is pretty high. That's why कोई रैंडम लोग आदमी डिबेट नहीं कर पाएगा उससे. यहाँ वहाँ से रैंडम कोट्स निकाल के बोलेगा देखो ये है, जिसको आपको पढ़ना पड़ेगा और 2-3 बुक पढ़ के पता चलेगा कि अच्छा ये तो गलत कंक्लूजन ड्रॉ कर रहा था. तो ही इज द evil twin of Jai Deepak. So the position of Rajputs declined further under Aurangzeb in 1671. Jaswant Singh was appointed to the low post of थानेदार of Jamrud. हाँ, अभी 1671 में आके और भी कम हो रहा है हिंदू इन्वॉल्वमेंट. थानेदार of Jamrud, while Ram Singh of Amber was dispatched to the east. Both were made to languish in these outposts for considerable periods. Aurangzeb also began to clamp down on the promotions of Rajputs early in his reign. तो promotion भी रुकवा दिया. Now, Satish Chandra says, one of the first actions which Akbar took after he had taken power in his own hands was to abolish the poll tax or jizya, which the non-Muslims were required to pay in a Muslim state. Although it was not a heavy tax, it was disliked because it made a distinction between subject and subject. Heavy नहीं था, ऐसे ही था थोड़ा बहुत. Historical disadvantage, economical disadvantage, historical poverty इससे नहीं होता है. At the same time, Akbar abolished the pilgrim tax on bathing at holy places such as Prayag, Banaras, etc. तो पहले ये तो नहीं बोला कि ये सब होता था. अब जब abolish हो रहा है तब जाके बोल रहा है देखो कितना अच्छा आदमी है, abolish कर दिया. पहले कभी नहीं बोला कि ये सब टैक्स देना पड़ता था. He also abolished the practice of forcibly converting prisoners of war to Islam. बंद कर दिया. This laid the essential foundation of an empire based on equal rights to all citizens, irrespective of their religious beliefs, unless you are a person living in Chittor, in which case 300 elephants will be set upon you so that you are trampled to death. इतना equality में भर गया है जिंदगी. Meenakshi Jain counters this by saying that jizya cannot be described as a light tax. It has been calculated that it amounts to 1 month's wages of an unskilled urban labourer. Irfan Habib has described the tax as extremely regressive. Look, Meenakshi Jain ji has quoted Muhammad Habib to counter Satish Chandra. Now she is bringing out quotes from even Irfan Habib's work to counter Satish Chandra. A Hindu Marxist historians are further left more pro-Islam, pro-Islamic invasions than Irfan Habib and Muhammad Habib themselves. So this is why I was mentioning that Rodi's meme that तू secular है, तुझे पता नहीं मगर तू है. I know you. I know that you are secular. Irfan Habib has described the tax as extremely regressive and one that, quote, bore the hardest on the poorest, end quote. So इसमें at least Irfan Habib comes out as a true Marxist. So next Satish Chandra says that the declaration which was signed by the leading ulemas has been wrongly called a decree of infallibility. Akbar claimed the right to choose only when there was a difference of opinion among those qualified to interpret the Quran. At a time when there were bloody conflicts between the Shias, Sunnis, Mahdavis in different parts of the country, Akbar wanted the widest toleration. There is little doubt that the mazhar had a salutary effect in stabilizing the religious situation in the empire. Meenakshi Jain points out that the mazhar was intended to strengthen Akbar's position among the Orthodox Muslims. It cannot be described as an attempt at the widest toleration. If it had, quote, had a salutary effect in stabilizing the religious situation in the empire, end quote, why was it abandoned and why did Abul Fazl not even refer to it? ये कैसा हिस्ट्री है जो सिर्फ मार्क्सिस्ट को पता है. मार्क्सिस्ट को पता है अकबर का हिस्ट्री कैसा था, अकबर के खुद के हिस्टोरियन को नहीं पता है कि क्या हो रहा था किंगडम में. Okay. Now, Satish Chandra says that Akbar also revised the educational syllabus, laying more emphasis on moral education and mathematics, and on secular subjects such as agriculture, geometry, astronomy, rules of government, logic, history, etc. He also gave patronage to artists, poets, painters, and musicians, so much so that his court became famous for the galaxy of famous people there, or the Navratna. Yes, हमने तो नवरत्न के बारे में pages after pages पढ़ा है ICSE बोर्ड में. Meenakshi Jain points out that only Persian poets were patronized by Akbar. Badauni puts their number at 168. 168 Persian poets were patronized by Akbar. Akbar was also the first Indo-Islamic king of North India to formally declare Persian as the sole language of administration in 1582. लैंग्वेज इम्पोज करना देखो किसको बोलते हैं. गुलाम हुसैन तबताबाई records. Earlier in India, the government accounts were written in Hindi according to the Hindu rule. Raja Todarmal acquired new regulations or zawabit from the clerks Sindagan of Iran, and the government offices there then were reorganized as they were in Wilayat. Okay, Wilayat probably means foreign, right? So Bilet in Bengali, Bilet means foreign. So Iranian clerks were recruited in large numbers and remained in noticeable control of accounts in the Mughal Empire. Akbar modified the prevailing curriculum in the madrasas with a view to popularizing Persian language and culture among the Hindus. In his reign, a large number of Hindus availed of madrasa education to acquire proficiency in Persian, which was a means of obtaining government service. तो जैसे कि आज हम लोग इंग्लिश बोलना चाहते हैं, जैसे कि राजा राम मोहन राय ने बोला कि मारो संस्कृत को गोली, इंग्लिश सीखो, तो वैसे ही लोगों को पर्शियन सीखना पड़ा मद्रासा में जाके हिंदुओं को, ताकि कोई नौकरी वोकरी मिले, नहीं तो सिर्फ सिकदार बन के घूमना पड़ेगा. Attempts were also made to cleanse Persian of Indian usages. गौरव चटर्जी को दिखाओ ये कोई. Indian usages, words, phrases and ideas. For details, see Muzaffar Alam's book. Meenakshi Jain ji is hitting them with their own soldiers. Now, Satish Chandra next point says that although the state dues were heavy, sometimes mounting to nearly half of his produce, there is no reason to believe that the peasant was left only with enough to keep body and soul together and was in no position to invest anything for the improvement of land or extension of cultivation. Although the life of the peasant was hard, he had enough to eat and to meet his simple requirements. बोल रहा है कि there is no reason to believe that the peasant was left with only enough to keep his body and soul together. गरीब था मगर अच्छा चल रहा था जिंदगी. Meenakshi Jain says, सतीश चंद्र बोल रहा है कि enough to eat and meet his simple requirements. ठीक है, गरीब है रहने तो. Meenakshi Jain बोल रहा है कि often neither production nor reproduction was possible. Irfan Habib has provided the most graphic account of the plight of the peasants in Mughal India, their flight from the land, and the sale of their wives, children and cattle in order to meet their revenue obligations. Irfan Habib दिखा रहा है, क्योंकि इरफान हबीब लग रहा है कि is more secular Marxist, a little more secular than Satish Chandra. Now, then next point, okay, let's see, a lot of comments have come. Chinmay is saying, in fact, Rajputs of Marwar revolted against Mughals. In fact, Rajputs of Marwar had revolted against Jahangir, also against Aurangzeb, Durgadas ji. Aurangzeb also had faced many revolts from Ajit Singh, Devi Singh, Durgadas Rathore for breaking Kashi Vishwanath, I see. Rustin, can you say the proper full name of this neurosurgeon Dr. Gorgo case? We are talking about Gorgo Chatterjee, the founder of the Bangla Pokho movement, the Bengali Pride movement, who says that it's okay for Bengali to be Arabized because Sanskrit was the first evidence of Sanskrit was found in Syria. Therefore, it's now, since the other languages come from Syria, so it's okay for Sanskrit or Bengali to have those influences in Bengali language, although the guy is all about Bengali pride. Okay, Nihilist is saying I missed the first live stream. Yeah, by first you mean today's previous one, right? So you can watch it later. It was just 1 hour 53 minutes. Uttishta Bharata is saying, Dada tumi ডাউনলোড করে দেখতে পারো, শিবা ভারত জয়পুর ডায়ালগের ওয়েবসাইট আছে. এটা কবীন্দ্র নেওয়াস্কর রচিত শিবাজি মহারাজের জীবনী, যেটা নিরীক্ষণ স্বয়ং মহারাজ করেছেন. আই সি, ইন্টারেস্টিং. ওকে, now we are going on with the next point of Satish Chandra. Then thus during the medieval times, during medieval times, as during earlier times, India continued to provide a home to many people who came from outside, but these immigrants rapidly assimilated themselves into the Indian society and culture, while at the same time retaining some of their special traits. This accounts for the richness and diversity which has been a special feature of Indian culture. Under Jahangir and Shah Jahan, the bulk of the nobles already consisted of those who had been born in India. Simultaneously, the proportion of Afghans, Indian Muslims, Hindustanis, and Hindus in the nobility continued to rise. Okay, first let me give my argument in this. The claim that so many people were coming from Afghanistan, etc., all the Muslim traders and etc. after the Islamic invasions, and that they assimilated and created diversity is based on absolutely hilarious premises. Because if they assimilated, how do we know their descendants? Do you know who are the descendants of Huns today? Do you know who are the descendants of Scythians? Do you know who are the descendants of Kushanas? Do you know who are the even descendants of Chandragupta Maurya? Or his lineage didn't exist, right? Or not? Most of the kings, most of the lineages, most of the kingdoms, we can't exactly track them down who's where or who came from where. Ahoms, Assamese people are the Ahom people, but they are as assimilated into the Indian culture as anyone else. But we know distinctly who are Christians, we know distinctly who are Muslims, and who have no intention. It's not like they can excuse that, hey, we came here just 200 years back, we came here just 500 years back, Muslims came here about 1200 years back, and still they have their such a strong distinct identity that they don't want to assimilate into this culture. So there is no assimilation. Assimilation अगर होता तो हमको समझ में नहीं आता था कि कौन है इस्लामिक इन्वेडर्स का डिसेंडेंट. ये लोग बोलते फिर है कि हम अशराफ है, तुम पसमंदा हो. अशराफ कौन है? जिसके खून में इस्लामिक इन्वेडर्स का खून है. तो क्या कहाँ हुआ है एसिमिलेशन? सूफी शायरी, शेरवानी पहना, बिरयानी खाया और अशराफ खून भी मेंटेन किया. एसिमिलेट किस में किया? इंग्लिश बोल पाया और हम भी इंग्लिश बोल रहे हैं, इससे एसिमिलेशन होगा. हिंदी का महाबैन कर दिया, बंगाली का महाबैन कर रहा है बांग्लादेश में, ये ऐसा एसिमिलेशन है. Meenakshi Jain says the Islamic invasions differed from the invasions of antiquity in that while the early foreigners embraced the spiritual ethos of this land, Islam sought to impose. Oh, nice. She's making exactly what I said, making my point. Islam sought to impose its faith, script, language, laws, and customs. It faced resistance from an evolved native faith that resisted being supplanted in its ancestral home. As for the misleading statement on the nobility, it had been dealt with elsewhere in this survey. Now, next point Satish Chandra makes is, although spending, not hoarding, was the dominant characteristic of the ruling class of the time, with only a few nobles remaining out of debt and bequeathing large sums of money to their children, the nobility did directly or indirectly contribute to the development of the economy. Now, Irfan Habib, Irfan Habib, a true Marxist, has totally repudiated this viewpoint. He has described the Mughal nobility as contributing little to economic growth. See, this is why you need to read scholarly articles, okay? अगर हम ये पेपर नहीं पढ़ते, हमको कहाँ पता चलता कि इरफान हबीब में भी थोड़ा बहुत ऑनेस्टी है, सतीश चंद्र से एटलीस्ट ज़्यादा ऑनेस्टी है. Now, next point from Satish Chandra is that medieval Hindi in the bridge form, that is the dialect spoken in the neighborhood of Agra, was also patronized by the Mughal emperors and Hindu rulers. From the time of Akbar, Hindi poets began to be attached to the Mughal court. A leading Mughal noble, Abdul Rahim Khani Khanan, produced a fine blend of bhakti poetry with Persian ideas of life and human relations. We have studied about this man in ICSE board. Thus, the Persian and the history literary traditions began to influence each other. But the most influential Hindi poet was Tulsidas, whose hero was Rama, and who used a dialect of Hindi spoken in the eastern parts of Uttar Pradesh. Pleading for a modified caste system based not on birth but on individual qualities, Tulsi was essentially a humanistic poet who upheld family ideals and complete devotion to Rama as a way of salvation open to all irrespective of caste. Okay, एक यहाँ देखो डिसऑनेस्टी है सतीश चंद्र का कि I don't know what counter Meenakshi Ji will give, but let me give my counter, what I can see from my knowledge so far. He used the word humanism as if humanism is opposed to Hinduism. ऐसे वो narrative set करना चाह रहे हैं. बोल रहे कि but he was kind of a humanist poet. ये जो essentially word use किया है, it means it was contrary to the Hindu tradition. He's saying तुलसी वॉज एसेंशियली अ ह्यूमनिस्टिक पोइट. और ये ह्यूमनिज्म, ह्यूमनिस्टिक, ये सब क्यों बोल रहा है? क्योंकि इसके साथ एक साथ बहुत सारा सूफी पोइट, पाकिस्तानी पोइट वेट भी घुसा देगा, फैज़ अहमद फैज़, ये सब घुसा देगा. वो लोग भी ह्यूमनिज्म का बहुत बात करते थे, इसलिए. तो ये जैसे उनका है वैसे हमारा भी है. यूनिक कुछ नहीं है. यूनिक सिर्फ है कास्ट सिस्टम. नाउ Meenakshi Jain says, quotes the famous historian Aziz Ahmad. Aziz Ahmad has drawn attention to the fact that parallel Hindu and Muslim intellectual traditions developed in Akbar's court. Persian literature of this period was uninfluenced by Sanskrit, even as Sanskrit and Hindi remained immune to Persian cultural traditions. लो, अजीज अहमद बोल रहा है कि कुछ इंटरेक्शन इन्फ्लुएंस कुछ नहीं हुआ, हर लोग अपना अपना काम कर रहे थे. Aziz Ahmad writes that remarkable in the Persian poetry written in India, except for a few specimens by Amir Khusro, is the complete rejection of Indian life and landscape as valid poetic material. This foreign imagery woven into complex and multiple patterns became the accepted stock in trade of Indo-Persian and later Urdu conventional poetic diction. Yeah, same with A.R. Rahman's daughter's original single song. It's composed and arranged by A.R. Rahman, obviously, and she has sung it. She has sung it beautifully, and the video is insane. The video's budget is probably higher than Kantara. Insanely great animation. The topic of the video is that she does not एन्जॉय इंडिया दैट मच. इंडिया ठीक है, इंडिया अच्छा है, पूजा वूजा हो रहा है, इधर उधर भरतनाट्यम हो रहा है, मगर जाना हमको है मक्का. ये है टॉपिक वीडियो का. तो दैट्स काइंड ऑफ द सेम थीम दैट दीज पीपल वर फॉलोइंग, दैट वी आर इन इंडिया बट क्या रखा है इंडिया, यह तो सोना वोना लेने आए थे. लाइक बाबरनामा में बाबर लिखता है कि इंडिया का कुछ ठीक नहीं है, म्यूजिक बुरा है, खाना बुरा है, क्लाइमेट बुरा है, मगर बहुत सोना है, हम जा नहीं सकते यहाँ से. Tulsidas moreover received no patronage whatsoever from Akbar. Next, Satish Chandra says that thus there was no atmosphere of confrontation between the Sikhs and the Mughal rulers during this period. What is he saying? बंदा बहादुर क्या कौन से एज में था? प्री वैदिक टाइम्स में बंदा बहादुर को मार दिया, उसके बेटे को मार दिया, चमड़ा उधर के दिखाया, उसको आँख वाँख निकल दिया. No confrontation between Sikhs and the Mughal rulers during this period. खालिस्तानियों भी यही बिलीव करते होंगे. Nor was there any systematic persecution of the Hindus. And hence no occasion for the Sikhs or any group or sect to stand forth as a champion of the Hindus against religious persecution. अच्छा. Religious persecution है कि नहीं है? रिलीजियस परसिक्यूशन का रेजिस्टेंस हो रहा है कि नहीं हो रहा? क्योंकि कभी बोल रहा है कि रिलीजियस परसिक्यूशन हुआ, रेजिस्टेंस इसलिए नहीं हुआ क्योंकि कास्टिज्म था. यहाँ पे बोल रहा है कि रिलीजियस परसिक्यूशन ही नहीं हुआ इसलिए रेजिस्टेंस नहीं हुआ. उसके अगले सेंटेंस में बोल रहा है कि देयर वाज नो रीजन टू बी अ चैंपियन ऑफ हिंदूज अगेंस्ट रिलीजियस परसिक्यूशन. तो रिलीजियस परसिक्यूशन है कि नहीं है ये क्लैरिफाई ही नहीं किया. The occasional conflict between the gurus and the Mughal rulers was personal and political rather than religious. Classic Hindu Marxist trope that it's all economical, it's all political. कुछ लोग धर्म को लेकर राजनीति करते हैं, कुछ लोग bro. Despite some display of orthodoxy by Shah Jahan at the beginning of his reign and a few acts of intolerance, such as the demolition of new temples, new को quotes में दिया है. He was not narrow in his outlook, which was further tempered towards the end in his reign by the influence of his liberal son Dara. Dara जिसका सर दिया काटा. Dara, the eldest son of Shah Jahan, was by temperament a scholar and a Sufi who loved to discourse with religious divines. Yes, he did. With the help of Brahmanas of Kashi. अब दाराशिकों को लेकर सेक्युलरिज्म समझाएगा हमको. He got the Gita translated into Persian, but his most significant work was an anthology of the Vedas, in the introduction to which Dara declared the Vedas to be heavenly books in point of time and in conformity with the Holy Quran, thus underlining the belief that there were no fundamental differences between Hinduism and Islam. क्या बोल रहा है ये? No fundamental differences नहीं था, confrontation नहीं था, तो इसे मारा क्यों? क्योंकि औरंगजेब और भी ज्यादा सेक्युलर था, इसलिए थोड़ा कम सेक्युलर भाई को मार दिया. Okay. Nihilist is saying Satish Chandra ne mera khoon khol diya. Shavya is saying, what about Guru Gobind Singh's two Shahzade killed by Mughals for not converting? Yeah. Shavya, you're reading saffronized history. It was done by RSS. Wow, Tulsidas praised by Satish Chandra. So does he endorse what Tulsidas said about Muslims and their atrocities? पढ़ा नहीं होगा उतना. अरे हम पहले दिन के स्ट्रीम में देख रहे थे ना, वो एलन विंक वो हिस्टोरियन बोल रहा था कि एक तो सतीश चंद्र सब कुछ इक्वेट कर रहा है यूरोपियन हिस्ट्री के साथ. अच्छा ये इंडिया में ही हुआ, इट वाज जस्ट लाइक दैट इन यूरोप. अच्छा ये गलत हुआ, इट वाज जस्ट लाइक दैट इन यूरोप. और फिर बोल रहा है कि नॉट ओनली दिस, ही डजंट इवन अंडरस्टैंड यूरोपियन हिस्ट्री प्रॉपरली. दैट्स व्हाट विंक वाज सेइंग. ओके. AFN, what is that name of the song? A.R. Rahman's? I don't remember the name of the song. You'll have to search it by typing A.R. Rahman daughter animated song Makkah, or give all these search words. The video is animated. Okay, Chinmay is saying Firoz Shah Tughlaq had broken temples in Kannauj and translated Hindu philosophical books to Persian and plagiarized the whole philosophy. Andre Wink was talking about R.S. Sharma, not Satish. Oh, right, he was talking about R.S. Sharma, yeah. So yeah, R.S. Sharma and Satish Chandra suffer from the same things apparently. Thanks Neelis for pointing out. And then Chinmay, what you are saying, yes, and all the Bengali, mostly all the Bengali Brahmins of Bengal, people with the surnames Banerjee, mainly Banerjee Bhattacharya, a lot of them are descendants of people who were kicked out from Kannauj by bin Qasim as well. Okay, तो हाँ, तो कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं था. कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं था हिंदू और मुस्लिम में, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं था. सब कुछ सेक्युलर था. ऐसे ही दारा शिकोह को मार दिया, वो इकोनॉमिकल रीजन था. तो मीनाक्षी जैन सेज Jahangir clearly stated in his autobiography that hostility to Guru Arjun had a religious dimension. ये खुद का प्राइमरी सोर्स, उनका अपना बायोग्राफी नहीं पढ़ेंगे मार्क्सिस्ट, सिर्फ बोलते फिरेंगे कि तू सेक्युलर है, तुझे पता नहीं. So Jahangir writes, in Goindwal, which is on the river Bia or Bias, there was a Hindu named Arjun, in the garments of sainthood and sanctity, so much so that he had captivated many of the simple-hearted of the Hindus and even of the ignorant and foolish followers of Islam by his ways and manners, and they had loudly sounded the drum of his holiness. They called him Guru, and from all sides stupid people crowded to worship and manifest complete faith in him. For 3 or 4 generations of spiritual successors, they had kept this shop warm. Many times it had occurred to me to put a stop to this vain affair, or to bring him into the assembly of the people of Islam. Secularism. Okay, there might be one thing that maybe according to Satish Chandra this is secularism. वो भी हो सकता है. Then Meenakshi Jain writes, after the execution of the Guru by Jahangir, his son and successor Guru Hargobind took to martial activities. He girded 2 swords, Piri and Miri, to symbolize the complementarily of spiritual and temporal authority. He encouraged his followers to engage in martial activity and built the fort of Lohgarh for defensive purposes. He was imprisoned by Jahangir for 2 years and harassed by Shah Jahan as well. He left the province of Lahore to reside in a territory of a Rajput vassal of the Mughals due to this persecution. Tara's view, okay, Rajput vassal of the Mughals, उसके अंदर रह पाया, उतना तक राजपूत वैसल तक ये harassment नहीं पहुंचा. Tara's views on the Gita and the Vedas elicited little support among the political and religious elites in the community. Yeah, Tara को support कौन किया? His anthology pertained to the Upanishads, not to Vedas proper. ये difference तो सतीश चंद्र को पता नहीं होगा, उनको लगता है ये सब same है. Okay, Shravya is saying Nirajan Anna don't give them new ideas. पता चला कल ये लॉजिक लगाएंगे कि औरंगजेब वाकई ज़्यादा सेक्युलर था तारा से. Chinmay, but this was refuted by Meenakshi ji that he only translated secular works. Okay, now Satish Chandra says, among the Muslims too, while the trend of Tawheed continued apace and was supported by many learning Sufi saints, a small group of the orthodox ulema reacted against it and the liberal policies of Akbar. The most renowned figure in the Muslim Orthodox and revivalist movement of the time was Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi. It will thus be seen that the influence of the orthodox thinkers and preachers was limited, being necessarily confined to narrow circles. The recurrent cycles of liberalism and orthodoxy in Indian history should be seen against the situation which was rooted in the structure of Indian society. It was one aspect of the struggle between entrenched privilege and power on the one hand, and the egalitarian and humanistic aspirations of the mass of the people on the other. Now, to this, Meenakshi Jain says, the dominant trend among the Sufis and ulema was in fact towards orthodoxy. After Sirhindi, Shah Waliullah began a movement to purge Islam of all pagan influence and practice, which we were discussing in the previous stream. The Wahhabi movement has been described as the practical culmination of the religio-political thought of Shah Waliullah. To describe the dominant trend in Indian Islam as a conflict between privilege and egalitarianism is typical of Marxist doublespeak. Johann Friedman in Islamic thought in relation to the Indian context. Yeah, this quote was used by Meenakshi Jain in a previous chapter as well, that वो जो conciliatory trend है in some Muslims, that was always weaker than the orthodox one. The few rulers who adopted it failed to inspire their successors, and the religious thinkers who developed it had few disciples who continued to walk on the path of inter-religious harmony and compromise. It was a complete failure. कुछ लोग हो सकते हैं ऐसे ट्राई किए थे, मगर किसी का कुछ आया गया नहीं उससे. Let me have some water. Afin is saying that not all Upanishads, only the 11 main ones. You'll have to say this when you talk about it, and mostly it was the Brihadaranyaka Upanishads. Next, Satish Chandra says, after Dharmat, Tara made frantic efforts to seek allies. He sent repeated letters to Jaswant Singh, who had retired to Jodhpur. The Rana of Udaipur was also approached. Jaswant Singh moved out tardily to Pushkar near Ajmer. After raising an army with the money provided by Dara, he waited there for the Rana to join him. But the Rana had already been won over by Aurangzeb with a promise of a rank of 7,000 and the return of the Parganas seized by Shah Jahan and Dara from him in 1654, following a dispute over the refortification of Chittor. Aurangzeb also held out to the Rana a promise of religious freedom and so-called favors equal to those of Rana Sangha. Thus, Dara failed to win over even the important Rajput Rajas to his side. Okay, so now the narrative is that even the Hindu king betrayed Dara, a secular man. So, Meenakshi Jain quotes Aziz Ahmad in this topic, says that Aziz Ahmad says, from the very beginning in the War of Succession, Aurangzeb's line of challenge against Dara Shikoh was the latter's, the Dara Shikoh's alleged apostasy and his association with Hindu theologians and mystics. That was the main bone of contention with Aurangzeb. The division of the loyalties of the Hindu generals during this civil war does not, ये जो loyalty इधर उधर हो रहा है हिंदू राजाओं का लग रहा है ऐसा, that does not alter the situation of the challenge. In any case, the most powerful of Hindu nobles, Jaswant Singh, who changed sides more than once, was primarily a partisan of Dara Shikoh and first of the Mughal generals to fight a pitched battle against Aurangzeb. Many of Jaswant Singh's Muslim officers were secretly in league with Aurangzeb, and it was a fear of their desertion that impelled him to change sides. In fact, Dara Shikoh could rely only on the absolute loyalty of Rajput elements of his army and his personal retainers in his struggle against Aurangzeb. Even Jai Singh, whose loyalty to Aurangzeb remained unswerving, was suspected on one occasion of having let Dara Shikoh escape to Sivistan. Hindu-Muslim unity might have happened many times, but it was stopped by other Muslims. 1857 में थोड़ा बहुत unity हुआ था, which is why Sir Syed Ahmed Khan wrote letters after letters to the British saying that no, we are not involved with this. Some stupid Muslim peasants got involved, got carried away. No, we don't want this. Because he was responding to the actual fact that on the ground Hindu and Muslims were united. In 1920-21 they were united. Now in 47, a lot of them like Abdul Ghaffar Khan, etc., they were willing to live happily with Hindus. Not a lot of them, some of them. Gandhi kicked them out. And even right now, we have some people like Khalid Beg, Amna Ansari Begum, etc., who are really putting an effort. Let's see how other Muslims treat them, and especially Dara Shikoh. Imagine if Dara Shikoh had actually become the king. It would have been so different. Hindu-Muslim relations would have been changed forever. So then next, Satish Chandra writes, thus, apart from being an orthodox Muslim, Aurangzeb was also a ruler. He could hardly forget the political reality that overwhelming population of India was Hindu and that they were deeply attached to their faith. Any policy which meant the complete alienation of the Hindus and the powerful Hindu Rajas and the Zamindars was obviously unworkable. Later in the 11th year of his reign, Aurangzeb took a number of measures. अभी हम ऑड्री ट्रुस्की के जैसे चीज़ों में आएंगे लग रहा है. In the 11th year of his reign, Aurangzeb took a number of measures which have been called puritanical. अच्छा अच्छा, ये उल्टा है. Puritanical मतलब एकदम साफ सुथरा कर दिया, ओके, मार के. Puritanical बोल रहा है, कुछ विशेष क्रिटिसिज्म नहीं. वैदिक मंत्र को मैजिकल स्पेल बोल दिया. पुराण में कैसे लिखा है बीवी को मारो, ये सब निकाल के दिखाया. अब ये औरंगजेब का काम को बोल रहा है प्यूरिटेनिकल, बट मेनी ऑफ विच वर रियली ऑफ एन इकोनॉमिक एंड सोशल कैरेक्टर. लो रोमिला थापर. अरे क्या हुआ कैमरा को? वेट. nihilist who called Hindu Muslim two antagonistic races? Dara Shikoh or what? Or you're talking about Sir Syed Ahmed Khan? Audrey Tushki logic. Aurangzeb was secular. हाँ अभी देखो ये Audrey Tushki का line बोल दिया. Dara Shikoh took the help of Jagannath Pandit of Kashi in doing this because of introducing Shruti and teaching it to a Muslim. A number of Kashi Sabha ousted Jagannath from the community as an outcast. Sir Syed Ahmed. Yes, I read that in India, Bharat, Pakistan. So now we get into Romila Thapar kind of things. पहली बात नोटिस करो कि औरंगजेब जब पूरा वो रेन ऑफ टेरर शुरू किया उसको बोल रहा है some have called them puritanical. थोड़ा बहुत. Look at the audacity, look at the stupidity, look at the क्या बोले, look at the चुतियापा. Some have called it puritanical. थोड़ा purity ज़्यादा डाल दिया. But many of which were really of an economic and social character. And against superstitious beliefs. क्या बोल रहा है? हिंदुओं को मारते फिर रहा है against superstitious beliefs. Thus, he forbade singing in the court and the official musicians were pensioned off. ये superstition के विरुद्ध activism है. Instrumental music and Naubat, the royal band, were however continued. Singing also continued to be patronized by the ladies in the harem था क्यों? And by individual nobles. It is of some interest to note, as has been mentioned before, that the largest number of Persian works on classical Indian music were written in Aurangzeb's reign, and that Aurangzeb himself was proficient in playing the veena. छोड़ दो भाई, हमको नहीं सुनना है veena. Now Meenakshi Jain is probably pissed off. Meenakshi Jain says, is the author trying to applaud Aurangzeb for his sensitivity to Hindus? The fact is that the emperor alienated every section of Hindu society, even Rajput royal families, which had served the Mughals for centuries. The Hindu zamindars mentioned here revolted continually in his reign. The invocation of an economic dimension to the puritanical policies of the emperor is comical. As for the Persian works in Indian classical music, since they were not the result of the emperor's patronage, they cannot be cited as an achievement of Aurangzeb's reign. औरंगजेब रेन में हुआ तो क्या हुआ? औरंगजेब ने तो कुछ नहीं किया उसके लिए. Next, Satish Chandra says, to promote trade among the Muslims who depended almost exclusively on state support, Aurangzeb at first largely exempted Muslim traders from the payment of cess. But he soon found that the Muslim traders were abusing it, even passing off the goods of Hindu merchants as their own to cheat the state. So, Aurangzeb reimposed the cess on Muslim traders but kept it half of what was charged from others. Similarly, he tried to reserve the posts of Peshkars and Karodis, petty revenue officials, for Muslims, but soon had to modify it in the face of opposition from the nobles and lack of qualified Muslims. कितना अच्छा आदमी है. Now, to this, Meenakshi Jain says, The discriminatory treatment of Hindu traders and the partiality towards Muslims was motivated by communal considerations. The posts of peshkars and karodis were reserved for Muslims in order to encourage conversions. In an article in Essays on Medieval India, Satish Chandra himself notes that the bulk of the recorded cases of conversions involved either small zamindars or petty state employees, or their words. Now, Satish Chandra ko counter karengi Meenakshi Jain with Satish Chandra's own words. Let's see what Satish Chandra says to counter himself. Such converts either expected confirmation or grants of zamindari or preferential treatment after their conversion. Preferential treatment after conversion, competing with the Muslims for official posts which were in short supply. तो क्या हो गया उसको सतीश चंद्र को इस बीच में? पहली बुक में जो लिखा है उसको कॉन्ट्रडिक्ट कर रहा है. Maybe he came across new facts. That's why his thoughts evolved. Okay. Chinmay is saying Aurangzeb Veena bajata tha. Benchod, didn't he die before hearing that crap? मतलब कुछ भी. Chinmay, yeah, Tantra arrives only from Shiva and Tawheed is for a deity and Vedanta is about Brahman, but this was the problem also with Nanak and Sikhs. Abhay saying, okay, the great Aurangzeb Babu, yeah. Veena bajata tha Aurangzeb, uska album nikalna chahiye tha. Now, Satish Chandra has contradicted himself or at least countered himself. Now, Meenakshi Jain says, the limited success of Aurangzeb's partisan policies cannot eliminate their communal overtones. Okay, तो policies successful नहीं हुआ, तो इसका मतलब इसका मतलब वो पॉलिसी सेक्युलर था. मुझे आपको मारना है, मैं मान नहीं पाया. Does that mean I didn't want to kill you? The fact that even Guru Tegh Bahadur was asked to accept Islam in return for his life shows that conversion was an ideal cherished by the emperor. Now, Satish Chandra again writes, Aurangzeb's order regarding temples was not a new one. It reaffirmed the position which had existed during the Sultanate period. Sultanate period में बोल रहा था it's fine, even Hindu kings did it. अभी बोल रहा है कि Sultans did it, तो क्या हुआ? कोई भी मंदिर तोड़ा, क्या हुआ? It reaffirmed the position which had existed during the Sultanate period and which had been reiterated by Shah Jahan early in his reign. In practice, it left wide latitude to the local officials as to the interpretation of the words long-standing temples. The private opinion and sentiment of the ruler in the matter was also bound to weigh with the officials. For example, after the rise of the liberal-minded Dara as Shah Jahan's favourite, few temples had been demolished in pursuance of his order regarding temples. Aurangzeb, as governor of Gujarat, ordered a number of temples in Gujarat to be destroyed, which often meant merely breaking the images and closing down the temples. अरे सिर्फ मंदिर बंद किया है और मूर्ति तोड़ दिया है, इसमें और क्या ज्यादा किया है? At the outset of his reign, क्या सतीश चंद्र क्या लिख रहा है क्या? कितना दूर जा सकता है कोई डिफेंड करने को? The private Aurangzeb ordered a number of temples in Gujarat to be destroyed, which often meant merely breaking the images and closing down the temples. At the outset of his reign, this is actually economically motivated. Can you understand? कुछ मंदिरों के सिर्फ मूर्ति तोड़ के और बंद करके क्यों भाग जा रहा है? क्योंकि उसमें सोना नहीं है. ठीक है, सोमनाथ मंदिर क्यों बार बार तोड़ रहा है? वहां पे निकाल के सोना बाहर निकालना है. जो मंदिर में सोना नहीं है उसको तोड़ने का हार्डवर्क भी नहीं करना है, सिर्फ मूर्ति का नाक वाक तोड़ो, भागो यहाँ से. So I am fascinated by this line. This is brilliant. I need to read this line once again to awaken people. So Aurangzeb ordered a number of temples in Gujarat to be destroyed, which often meant merely breaking the images and closing down the temples. At the outset of his reign, Aurangzeb found that images in these temples had been restored and idol worship had been resumed. Aurangzeb therefore ordered again in 1665 that these temples be destroyed. The famous temple of Somnath, which he ordered to be destroyed earlier in his reign, was apparently one of the temples mentioned above. तो ये डिफेंड करते करते अचानक भूल भी गया कि डिफेंड कर रहा है. डिफेंस का ही नैरेटिव सजाया, उसके बाद डिटेल दिया कि क्या क्या तोड़ा. ये क्या क्या तोड़ा में हम डिफेंस सुने कि समझे कि कितना हरामी था औरंगजेब. क्या बोलना चाह रहा है सतीश चंद्र? कोहेरेंस भी नहीं है लिखने में. Now Meenakshi Jain says, what does the author mean by saying local officials had wide latitude regarding temples and then claiming that the private opinion and sentiment of the ruler was also bound to influence them? Incoherent. Shah Jahan, despite his fondness of Dara, was orthodox in his religious beliefs. Dara's views on the Upanishads had no adherents in his community. Yes, Dara was alone. And as the author himself admits, Aurangzeb as governor under Shah Jahan destroyed temples in Gujarat. खुद बोल रहा है, बोल के बोल रहा है, नहीं नहीं ये इसमें तो इकोनॉमिक्स था. अभी हाँ अभी थोड़ा कमेंट पढ़ना पड़ेगा. ड्यूड वाज द सोमनाथ टेम्पल प्रोड्यूसिंग गोल्ड, इफ सो इट मस्ट बी अ मिरेकल. हाँ बहुत सोना वहाँ पे स्टोर करके रखा था क्योंकि इट वाज फंक्शनिंग एज अ बैंक. एवरीवन यूज्ड टू टेक लोन्स फ्रॉम द टेम्पल, लीव ऑन शिप्स, देन यूज्ड टू रिटर्न एंड गिव अ परसेंटेज ऑफ द बिजनेस एज इंटरेस्ट टू द टेम्पल. वो सब जमा हुआ था, वो लेना था. Yeah, Karthik calling Karthik. Satish rebukes Satish. Yes. Now Satish Chandra says, however, it does not seem that Aurangzeb's order regarding ban on new temples led to a large-scale destruction of temples at the outset of his reign. As Aurangzeb encountered political opposition from a number of quarters, such as the Marathas, Jats, etc., he seems to have adopted a new stance. In case of the conflict with local elements, he now considered it legitimate to destroy even long-standing Hindu temples as a measure of punishment and as a warning. Further, he began to look upon temples as centers of spreading subversive ideas, that is, ideas which were not acceptable to the orthodox elements. हाँ ये तो ठीक ही बोल रहा है. फाइनली कुछ ठीक बोला, बट ये ऐसे बोल रहा है कि एज इफ इट वाज सरकाजम, क्योंकि औरंगजेब को डिफेंड करना है. He is thinking he is going to hint this at, he is going to give it the color of economic reasons or strategic reasons, okay? But this was the actual reason, this was a religious reason. Thus, because religion, हिंदू धर्म के साथ जो नॉलेज प्रोडक्शन का कनेक्शन है वो तो सतीश चंद्र के दिमाग में नहीं घुस रहा है, इसलिए ये सब बोल रहा है. Thus, he took strict action when he learnt in 1669 that in some of the temples in Thatta, Multan and especially at Banaras, both Hindus and Muslims used to come from great distances to learn from the Brahmanas. Aurangzeb issued orders to the governors of all provinces to put down such practices and to destroy the temples where such practices took place. It was in this context that many temples built in Orissa during the last 10 to 12 years were also destroyed. But it is wrong to think that there were any orders for the general destruction of temples. क्या बोल रहा है ये? 5-6 लाइन में डिस्क्राइब किया कि कहाँ कहाँ कैसे कैसे मंदिर तोड़ा, फिर उसके बाद बोल रहा है कि इट इज रॉन्ग टू थिंक देयर वर एनी ऑर्डर्स फॉर द जनरल डिस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ टेम्पल्स. मतलब क्या है इसका? ठीक है, उसके बाद बोल रहा है कि हाउएवर द सिचुएशन वाज डिफरेंट ड्यूरिंग पीरियड्स ऑफ हॉस्टिलिटीज. Thus, during 1679 and 80, when there was a state of war with the Rathors of Marwar and the Rana of Udaipur, many temples of old standing were destroyed at Jodhpur and its Parganas. अच्छा, बोल रहा है कि मंदिर तोड़ा गया मगर सिर्फ मूर्ति तोड़ा और मंदिर बंद किया. फिर बोल रहा है कि मंदिर तोड़ा गया मगर इसमें उसका ऑर्डर नहीं था. फिर बोल रहा है कि मंदिर तोड़ा गया. 3 बार एग्जाम्पल दे के 3 बार 3 कंक्लूजन ड्रॉ कर रहा है, मगर बेसिस ये है कि मेन पॉइंट ये है कि मंदिर तो तोड़ा गया ही गया. क्या अजीब क्रिटिकल थिंकिंग है ये. लोग साइंटिफिक थिंकिंग क्रिटिकल थिंकिंग मरवाते हैं पूरा दिन. अरे किसी मार्क्सिस्ट को दिखाओ ये पेपर, कार्ल मार्क्स सुसाइड कर लेगा ये पेपर पढ़ के. Fuck, what the fuck am I reading? अरे नीलिस्ट ये क्यों रेकमेंड किया था? मेरा IQ कम हो जा रहा है ये पढ़ के. मीनाक्षी जैन says, except for attempting exonerate औरंगजेब, मतलब उसको दोष देना अवॉइड करना है, ये उसका गोल है. सुबह में उठ के प्रण लिया है कि औरंगजेब को कैसे डिफेंड करे. Except for attempting to exonerate Aurangzeb, it is difficult to comprehend Satish Chandra's analysis of the emperor's policy on temples. हाँ, क्या बोल क्या रहा है? The fact remains that the destruction of temples was a recurring feature of Aurangzeb's reign. Yeah. So, J.S. Grewal, Sikhs of Punjab नाम का एक बुक लिखा है उन्होंने. He, for example, notes that in the first half of his reign, Aurangzeb adopted an aggressive social and political policy. He destroyed some important Hindu temples even in times of peace. हाँ, ये तो सतीश चंद्र भी बोलेगा, बोलेगा कि सिर्फ मंदिर में ताला लगा दिया और मूर्ति तोड़ दिया, और इससे ज़्यादा क्या किया. After 1670, iconoclasm was ordered in a general manner, and many old temples desecrated. There are instances of vandalism in the south even in the last years of Aurangzeb's reign. In 1698, for example, the temple in Bijapur was destroyed and a mosque built in its place on imperial orders. Sometime after 1700, Aurangzeb appointed hatchetmen, gunde badmash वगैरह, hatchetmen to dig up the foundations and destroy the stone temples in Maharashtra, including the famous shrine of Pandharpur. There is no evidence that temples served as centers of subversion. Subversion meaning here rebellious activities, etc. The very fact that the emperor object to Muslims learning from Brahmins reveals his narrow outlook. ये सतीश चंद्र को दिखा ही नहीं, मेंशन किया मगर समझ में नहीं आया, अंदर ब्रेन में नहीं घुसा. Nihilist, yes, this is so stupid. I will definitely make shorts out of this. Nihilist बोल रहा है my भाई दिमाग खराब हो गया मेरा. चिन्मय बोल रहा है बेंचो मंदिर तो तोरा ही था ना या. अब है बोल रहा है आज पागल खाना भर्ती होना पड़ेगा. क्या लिखा है ये? Okay, then Satish Chandra says, there has been a considerable discussion among historians regarding Aurangzeb's motives for the step reimposition of the jizya. Let us see what it was not. It was not meant to be an economic pressure for forcing the Hindus to convert to Islam, for its incidence was too light. For its incidence was too light. Women, children, the disabled and the indigent, that is, those whose income was less than the means of subsistence, were exempted, as were those in government service. Nor in fact did any significant section of Hindus change their religion due to this tax. अच्छा. Second, because they preferred to be poor. मगर हम हिंदू रहेंगे. अच्छा, ये देखो, ये फिर से वो लॉजिक है कि अच्छा मुझे आपको मारना है, मार नहीं पाया, इसका मतलब है मुझे आपको मारना ही नहीं था. ये कंक्लूजन फिर ड्रॉ कर रहे हैं यहाँ पे. बोल रहा है कि अच्छा Hindus did not convert. That means the jizya was not meant to convert them. Lol. Hindus defeated the idea of jizya. That's why jizya's idea was something else. ये है सतीश चंद्र का conclusion. Not in fact did any significant section of Hindus change their religion due to this tax. Secondly, it was not a means of meeting a difficult financial situation. अच्छा, ऐसे ही जिजिया था, तो कन्वर्ट करने के लिए भी नहीं था, गवर्नमेंट का कोई फाइनेंशियल डिफिकल्टी भी नहीं था. ऐसे ही जस्ट ऐसे ही मजा है, जिजिया कुछ नाम अच्छा लगा दे देते हैं, जिजिया करो कुछ जिजिया विजिया उठाओ. Although the income from jizya is said to have been considerable, Aurangzeb sacrificed a considerable sum of money by giving up a large number of cesses called abwabs. अच्छा, abwab तो टैक्स डिडक्शन कर दिया, इसलिए जिजिया हुआ, और कोई कारण नहीं था जिजिया का. माय गॉड. अब Aurangzeb gave up abwabs which were not sanctioned by the Shara and were hence considered illegal. The reimposition of jizya was in fact both political and ideological in nature. अब तक क्या बोल रहा था? It was meant to rally the Muslims. अच्छा, it was meant to rally the Muslims for the defense of the state against the Marathas and the Rajputs who were up in arms. And possibly against the Muslim states of the Deccan, especially Golconda, which was in alliance with the infidels. Secondly, jizya was to be collected by honest, God-fearing Muslims who were especially appointed for the purpose, and its proceeds were reserved for the ulema. ये अच्छा है कि बुरा है? सतीश चंद्र को ये क्या लगता है, ये बहुत बढ़िया काम हुआ? जिजिया हिंदुओं से उठा के उलेमा को दे दिया, ये इसमें कुछ प्रॉब्लम नहीं दिख रहा है इसको? It was thus a big bribe for the theologians, among whom there was a lot of unemployment, but the disadvantages outweighed the possible advantages of the step. Fuck. Disadvantages outweighed the possible advantages of the step. Disadvantage क्या था जिजिया का? तभी तो advantage था. Okay, next Satish Chandra is saying next Meenakshi Jain is saying that the proceeds from the jizya have been estimated to constitute about 15% of the total state income towards the end of Aurangzeb's reign. In the villages, jizya was levied at a flat rate of 4% in the Khalisa and Jagir lands. Income from the towns under this head was also considerable. Complaints against the high rate of jizya tax came from several parts of the country. In Burhanpur, for example, while rupees 26,000 was collected as jizya in 1 year, 1700s mein, the following year the amount was raised to 1,08,000 for half the city wards. 1,08,000 का टैक्स एक शहर से लेट 1600s में. समझो कितना टैक्स उठाया. Jizya always had a religious dimension, which is why it could rally Muslim opinion. Exactly. Muslim opinion को rally करने के लिए है, मगर बोल रहा है कि इसका कोई religious motivation नहीं है. By stating that the jizya was to be collected by God-fearing Muslims, is the author implying that the Hindus therefore had no objection to paying the tax? God-fearing Muslim हो या हरामी Muslim हो, उससे Hindus का क्या है? टैक्स तो हिंदू को देना ही होगा. गॉड फियरिंग मुस्लिम्स का क्या कनेक्शन है इसके साथ? फर्दर, what is the evidence of unemployment among the theologians? ये एविडेंस कहाँ से मिला? The fact that the emperor was solicitous of their welfare surely has some implications. हाँ, तो ये हिंदू से जिजिया लेके थियोलॉजियंस को क्यों दे रहा था? किस कारण से? कुछ कारण तो है, ऐसे ही तो नहीं दे रहा था. Okay. Chinmay is saying, Abhay, Shivaji Maharaj in his letters clearly stated that Aurangzeb reinstated jizya because all money was going in fighting Maratha, Sikh and Afghan Pashtun rebellions. Yes. Okay. Attempt to murder is not a crime. Yes. Okay. क्या अजीब चीज़ है ये. अभी भी 10 पेज बाकी है इसका. नहीं, 8-9 पेज बाकी है. Now Satish Chandra says, although Aurangzeb considered it legitimate to encourage conversion to Islam, evidence of systematic or large-scale attempts at forced conversion is lacking. Nor were Hindu nobles discriminated against. Hindu nobles के साथ कुछ भी नहीं हुआ. A study has shown that the number of Hindus in the nobility during the second half of Aurangzeb's reign steadily increased. अच्छा, इसका मतलब काम करने वाला आदमी फिर से कम हो गया था इसलिए. Till the Hindus, including Marathas, formed about 1/3 of the nobility as against 1/4 under Shah Jahan. So, Meenakshi Jain refutes this by saying that since the misrepresentation of facts is so blatant, it would be in order to quote Athar Ali, who has written the Mughal nobility under Aurangzeb. So, in 1970, she is going to quote Muslim authors, Muslim historians, Marxist historians to refute, and even Satish Chandra's own refutations to refute Satish Chandra. So, Athar Ali says, it is clear from these figures that there had been a distinct decline in the number of nobles directly coming from foreign countries since the time of Akbar. And in the course of Aurangzeb's long reign, direct recruitment of foreigners declined even more sharply, as is apparent from the proportionately lower number of foreign-born nobles in the second period as compared to the first. It is possible to point out various reasons for this decline. The Uzbek and Safavid kingdoms were no longer as powerful as they had been earlier, and consequently the same number of nobles of administrative experience and status no longer came to India from those lands for recruitment to the Mughal nobility. Moreover, Aurangzeb's attention was concentrated for the most part of his reign on the Deccan, and he never aspired to follow a forward or militaristic policy in the northwest like his father or great-grandfather. He was therefore not likely to go out of his way to offer exceptional inducements to Turani and Irani nobles to desert their masters for Mughal service. On this hand, there is no evidence that Aurangzeb ever consciously set out to so-called Indianize the nobility. Such Indianization as occurred was purely the result of historical circumstances and not of a deliberate policy. This is Athar Ali is saying this. Athar Ali goes on to say, it will be noticed that in the first part of Aurangzeb's reign, the position of Hindu nobles declined slightly, but in the last 29 years, it improved appreciably, with the result that during this time, there were more Hindus in service proportionately than under Shah Jahan or indeed at any former period. These tables would therefore provide a fine lawyer's answer to any charge that Aurangzeb discriminated against Hindu Mansabdars. Yet, the matter is not really so simple. The number of Hindus in the period is inflated because of the influx of the Marathas, who began to outnumber the Rajputs in the nobility. They were not recruited to the service on account of a policy of religious tolerance, but had practically forced their way in. Before Aurangzeb's fatal involvement in the Deccan had compelled him to begin admitting Marathas wholesale in order to secure their submission, he had in fact tried to reduce the number of Hindu nobles. This is clear from the figures for 1658 to 1678. In these 30 years, as we have seen, the number of the Rajputs began to decline towards the end of this period and continued to go down in the next. However, not much can be built either way exclusively on these figures, and the fact remains that despite Aurangzeb's avowed policy of religious discrimination, the Hindus continued to form a large section of his nobility. From the foregoing account, it should be clear that a marked expansion of the nobility did not take place till Aurangzeb embarked on the policy of annexing the entire Deccan. As a result of fresh recruitment made during this period, the internal composition of the nobility changed in some material respects. The Deccanese, including the Marathas, came to form a high proportion of the nobility, particularly in the higher ranks. there was a corresponding decline in the position of some of the older elements such as the Rajputs, Sayyids of Barha and others. The Turanis and Iranis also lost a little of their previous eminence. The Afghans improved their positions owing to the influx of the Afghan officers who had been previously in the service of Bijapur. So what I was saying about 1 hour back is that whenever they were hiring Hindu people in their governance model in any shape or form, it was because of meritocracy, not because of religious tolerance and not because of affirmative action. कि हिंदू है बेचारे को ले लो, ऐसा नहीं था कभी. उसका काम मुस्लिमों से बेटर आता था उसको, इसलिए ले रहा था बार बार. Next, Aurangzeb says, Satish Chandra, it's the same thing. Satish Chandra says, thus Aurangzeb did not try to change the nature of the state, but reasserted its fundamentally Islamic character. Okay, ये तो criticism लग रहा है. Aurangzeb's religious beliefs cannot be considered the basis of his politics. 2 sentences में खुद का contradiction कर दिया. 1 minute पानी पीना दो. Chinmay is saying ये leftist historians कौन सा माल फूकते हैं यार. I'm literally on head because of this. This is what is being taught here in MSPC coachings also. Yeah. क्या लिखा है ये, एकदम माल फूक के लिखा है. मार्क्सिस्ट लोग तो माल फूकते ही बहुत. ये एकदम बढ़िया केरला वेरला का लेके बैठा होगा. केरला में भी तो इनके बहुत भाई लोग हैं ना. केरला वो गोल्ड लेके बैठा था. तो देखो फर्स्ट लाइन और सेकंड लाइन का डिफरेंस देखो. Aurangzeb did not try to change the nature of the state, ठीक है. Reasserted its fundamentally Islamic character, ठीक है. Islamic character को reinstate किया state में, लेकिन religious beliefs cannot be considered the basis of his political policies. While an orthodox Muslim and desirous of upholding the strict letter of the law, as a ruler, he was keen to strengthen and expand the empire. But that was on the basis of Islam, because Satish Chandra himself just said that reasserted the fundamental Islamic character of his state and governance. Hence, he did not want to lose the support of the Hindus. हाँ, इसलिए मुझे एक बहुत दिन पहले मेरा एक मुस्लिम फेसबुक फ्रेंड था, वो बोल रहा था कि ब्रो यू आर बीइंग टू हार्श ऑन औरंगजेब, ही वाज फ्रॉम असम. तो देखो he renovated some temples in Assam, he gave money to build so many temples in Assam. History is so nuanced. तो हिस्ट्री इज नुआंस तब पता चलता है जब औरंगजेब को डिफेंड करना होता है. कास्टिज्म के बाद होगा तो नुआंस खत्म. Hence, he did not want to lose the support of the Hindus to the extent possible. However, his religious ideas and beliefs on the one hand and his political or public policies on the other clashed on many occasions, and Aurangzeb was faced with difficult choices. Sometimes this led him to adopt contradictory policies, बिचारा, which harmed the empire. एक बात है कि ये हो सकता है that this is a fact that maybe he was a Muslim at heart but he wanted to be secular, but ये हो नहीं रहा था, contradiction हो रहा था, एक conflict हो रहा था. मगर ये conclusion जो draw कर रहा है सतीश चंद्र ये लाइन में जे कि औरंगजेब्स religious beliefs cannot be considered the basis of his political policies, ये तो इसका conclusion है. इसका तो कोई factual basis हो नहीं सकता. This is his conclusion, this is his interpretation of the facts. तो ये conclusion इतना चूतिया है कि उससे हम सतीश चंद्र का अगले सेंटेंसेस में जो सीमिंगली ऑब्जेक्टिव एनालिसिस है ये कैसे ट्रस्ट करें. जो 4 लाइन पहले इतना अजीब चीज बोल सकता है, वो 4 लाइन बाद क्या एनलाइटनमेंट एरा का मॉडर्निस्ट ऑब्जेक्टिव थिंकिंग मरवाएगा, हम कैसे उसको विश्वास करें. तो देन मीनाक्षी जैन सेज दैट द स्टेट द ऑथर कंसीड्स was quote-unquote fundamentally Islamic in character, yet he argues that religious beliefs were not the basis of Aurangzeb's policies. Whether Aurangzeb adopted contradictory policies or not, the author is certainly contradictory. Oh, Meenakshi Jain is trolling Satish Chandra now. She is fed up of writing this paper. Man, look at Meenakshi Jain's patience. मैं सिर्फ ये पेपर पढ़ के इतना गाली दे रहा हूँ. मीनाक्षी जैन ने लिखा है, बैठ के पढ़ा है पूरा बुक का बुक, फिर बैठ के ये पेपर लिखा है. ये धैर्य जो है यही एकेडमिक्स को सेटअपार्ट करता है मुझ जैसों के साथ, मुझ जैसों से. Okay, then Satish Chandra says the official explanation for this as given in some later Persian sources is that after his return from Assam, the Guru, in association with one Hafiz Adam, a follower of Sheikh Ahmed Sirindi, had resorted to plunder and rapine, laying waste the whole province of the Punjab. According to Sikh tradition, the execution was due to the intrigues of some members of his family who disputed his succession, and by others who had joined them. Because for Aurangzeb, the execution of the Guru was only a law and order question. ये खालिस्तानियों को सुनाओ, कभी बोल रहा है कुछ रिलीजियस काम किया, इसको मार वार दिया, मंदिर तोड़ा, कभी बोल रहा है कि इकोनॉमिक रीजन है, कभी बोल रहा है स्ट्रेटेजिक रीजन है, कभी बोल रहा है सिर्फ मूर्ति ही तो तोड़ा, सिर्फ मंदिर में ताला लगा दे, इससे ज़्यादा क्या किया, और अब बोल रहा है कि गुरु गोविंद सिंह को मार दिया, ये सिर्फ लॉ एंड ऑर्डर क्वेश्चन था, इससे ज़्यादा क्या था. Fuck. Okay. Now, Meenakshi Jain writes, the uproar this interpretation created and the unreliability of the Persian sources quoted is well known and forms part of the Marxist endeavor to underplay the severity of Muslim rule. Guru Tegh Bahadur was deeply concerned about the religious persecution of Hindus in his time and decided to quote martyrdom to uphold his beliefs. Yeah. He was arrested by the Mughals and kept in custody for 4 months before being brought to Delhi in 1675, where he was asked to perform a miracle as proof of his closeness to God. Wow, wow, wow. The Guru refused and was then asked to accept Islam. 3 of his companions were executed in his presence in a bid to intimidate him. See, सिर्फ law and order problem है, इससे ज़्यादा. Upon his failure to embrace Islam, he was beheaded in Chandni Chowk on imperial orders. सिर्फ law and order problem के लिए. To say that Aurangzeb viewed the execution of the Guru as only a law and order question lies in the face of all available evidence. Okay. Afin says, University of California, San Diego is recruiting Dalits and Muslims for caste quota law and has ordered non-South Asians to be aware of the upper caste and not work with them thinking they are same. See, एक बात मुझे लग रहा है कि ये चीज़ हो तो अच्छा हो. ये चीज़ में 2 advantages है. This will break USA from inside. इसमें हमारे आइडियोलॉजिकल एलाई होने का कोई बात नहीं है, हम प्रोटेस्ट कर सकते हैं, मगर ये हो रहा है तो अच्छा हो रहा है. यूएसए खुद अपने पैर पे कुल्हाड़ी मार रहा है. मगर और भी इम्पोर्टेंट है कि अब शायद एनआरआई हिंदुओं का नींद खुलेगा. बोथ कास्ट एंड रेसिज्म आर डिराइव्ड फ्रॉम मोनोथीज्म. यस. ओ, डार्क प्रिंस इज हियर, बहुत दिनों के बाद. ओके, नेक्स्ट सतीश चंद्र सेज, although Guru Govind Singh was not able to withstand Mughal might for long or to establish a separate Sikh state, he created a tradition and also forged a weapon for its realization later on. It also showed how an egalitarian religious movement could, under certain circumstances, turn into a political and militaristic movement and subtly move towards regional independence. अब गुरु गोविंद सिंह को भी क्रिटिसाइज कर रहा है क्या? बोल रहा है कि देखो ये लोग तो पहले egalitarian थे फिर बाद में कैसे पॉलिटिकल और मटेरियलिस्टिक बन गए. औरंगजेब तो ये सब कुछ भी नहीं था, वो तो सिर्फ लॉ एंड ऑर्डर सिचुएशन हैंडल करने के लिए इसको मार देता था, मंदिर तोड़ देता था. कितना अच्छा आदमी था. ओके. Then Meenakshi Jain says, after devaluing the Sikh resistance to Mughal rule throughout the text, the author here ominously talks of regional independence, by implication casting a shadow on the movement. Yeah. Further, the circumstances in which a so-called egalitarian religious movement turned into a so-called political and militaristic movement should be clarified. हाँ, क्यों हुआ? What was the reason, सतीश जी? तो बात है कि egalitarian था, militaristic हो गया किस लिए? आप लोग तो 70 साल पहले भी egalitarian थे, अभी भी egalitarian हो. आप लोगों को militaristic बनना क्यों नहीं पड़ा? माओइस्ट बन गए. माओइस्ट पहले से भी militaristic थे, अभी भी militaristic है. आप लोग पहले भी egalitarian थे, अभी भी egalitarian है. सिर्फ उन लोगों कुछ लोगों को ब्राइब देते फिरते हैं मिलिटरिस्टिक होने के लिए. आप लोग खुद क्यों नहीं आपको बनना क्यों नहीं पड़ा? क्योंकि आप पर कोई हमला नहीं हो रहा था. ठीक है, खराब ट्वीट्स आते हैं आप लोगों को. लास्ट टेक्स्ट ऑफ दिस चैप्टर, सतीश चंद्र सेज, द ब्रीच विथ मारवाड़ एंड मेवाड़ weakened the Mughal alliance with the Rajputs as a crucial period. Above all, it created doubts about the firmness of Mughal support to old and trusted allies and the ulterior motives of Aurangzeb. While it showed the rigid and obstinate nature of Aurangzeb, it did not, however, show a determination to subvert Hinduism as has been alleged. Okay. फिर से Aurangzeb का डिफेंस आ गया. While it showed rigid and obstinate nature of Aurangzeb. Oh my God. देखो, एक चीज़ होता है कि औरंगजेब का कुछ काइंड ऑफ थोड़ा बहुत बेनेवोलेंट 1-2 चीज़ दिखा के, मतलब बोलो कि औरंगजेब का एक अच्छा बहुत सुंदर एक पपी था घर में, तो ये दिखा के कोई अगर आर्ग्यू करे कि देखो औरंगजेब कितना अच्छा आदमी था, तब it at least make sense grammatically, at least conceptually it makes sense. Full context में it might not make sense. ये सतीश चंद्र क्या कर रहा है, औरंगजेब का हरामीपना ही बोल रहा है बार 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 बार. वो बोलने के अगले सेंटेंस में बोल रहा है कि बट इट वॉज नॉट बिकॉज ऑफ एनी रिलीजन और स्टफ. तो अभी अभी बोल रहा है कि while it showed the rigid and obstinate nature of Aurangzeb, it did not show a determination to subvert Hinduism, as has been alleged. Because during the period after 1679, large number of Marathas were allowed entry into the nobility, because Marathas forced their way in. हमको नहीं लेगा तो कहाँ जाएगा? Meenakshi Jain says, it is surely well known that the recruitment of Marathas was part of Mughal strategy and in no way implied cessation of conflict with them. Further, Marathas were not appointed to top posts. They mostly served as troop captains for Mughal generals in the Deccan. No matter how strenuous the Marxist exertions in favor of Aurangzeb, they cannot succeed in presenting him as a champion of Hinduism. Okay. Next, ये क्या है? Sikh. Sikh का मतलब क्या है? I keep forgetting. This is a random brief selection of bloopers in Satish Chandra's book. Okay, now a full troll mood में है मीनाक्षी जी, और सिर्फ 5-6 पेज बाकी है. Meenakshi ji is going to troll heavily. This is a random brief selection of bloopers in Satish Chandra's textbook. The intention is merely to highlight the genuine problems of comprehension faced by the student reader. हाँ, comprehension तो हम already पढ़ रहे थे कि कोई coherence, कोई meaning ही नहीं है sentence का, paragraph का. Okay. Abhay saying, I call myself a Ghazi, but it is not because of religious motivation. Yes, it's just a nice name. Okay. देखते हैं क्या क्या ट्रोल किया है मीनाक्षी जी ने. So, Satish Chandra says, these tribes came in many waves and indulged in a great deal of ravaging and plundering in the territories of the old Roman Empire. The Byzantine Empire was a large and flourishing empire which continued to trade with Asia after the collapse of the Roman Empire in the... अच्छा, हाँ, CCC. क्लास 11 का बच्चा ये सेंटेंस पढ़ के कुछ कॉम्प्रिहेंड कैसे करेगा? देखो कितना अजीब सेंटेंस कंस्ट्रक्शन है. इट्स नॉट लूसिड, इट हैज टू बी मच मोर लूसिड. Now she's criticizing his authorship skills as well. Okay. ये सेंटेंस पढ़ के देखो कुछ समझ में नहीं आ रहा है. The Byzantine Empire was a large and flourishing empire which continued to trade with Asia after the collapse of the Roman Empire in the West. हाँ, बहुत लंबा सेंटेंस. Then no king could hope to maintain out of his own resources the large body of cavalry needed and to provide them with armor and equipment. Hence, the army was decentralized, assigning to the fief holders the responsibility of maintaining a fixed force of cavalry and infantry for the service of the king. Imagine you are in class 11 and you are having to study this. It also made possible a cavalry charge with lances held tightly to the body without the rider being thrown off by the shock of the impact. The earlier device was either a wooden stirrup or a piece of rope which only provided a toe hold. The Pope, who was the head of the Catholic Church, became not only a religious head but one who exercised a great deal of political and moral authority as well. However, some of the monasteries which became exceedingly wealthy began to behave like feudal warlords. अच्छा, इसका क्या meaning है? However, some of the monasteries which became exceedingly wealthy began to behave like feudal lords. अच्छा, ये दो sentence को आगे पीछे करके कुछ समझ में नहीं आएगा. Okay, although the Abbasid caliphs were Orthodox Muslims, they opened wide the gate of learning from all quarters as long as it did not challenge the fundamental tenets of Islam. ये sentence सुनो. Although the Abbasid caliphs were Orthodox Muslims, okay, one statement, they are Orthodox. Then says they opened wide the gate of learning. Then says, as long as it did not challenge the fundamental tenets of Islam. A का contradiction B का contradiction C, which agrees with A. China's society and culture had attained a climax in the 8th and 9th centuries under the Tang rule. The Mongols wrought great death and destruction in China, but to their highly disciplined and mobile cavalry forces, the Mongol rulers were able to unify North and South China under one control for the first time. ये देखो, contradiction. Meenakshi Jain is going to point out to us here. Okay, another fun sentence. According to a 9th century Arab writer, the empire was so large that even the fastest vessel could not complete a round trip of it in 2 years. Okay. Clarity ही नहीं है. Then make a chart showing the, अच्छा ये स्टूडेंट को बोल रहा है, make a chart showing the hierarchy of the authority of the feudal system of Europe. वाह वाह वाह, ये यूरोपियन हिस्ट्री में पीएचडी करने वाले को भी आता होगा कि नहीं पता नहीं. Make a chart showing the hierarchy of the authority of the feudal system of Europe. Okay, each of these empires, although they fought amongst themselves, provided stable conditions of life over large areas and gave patronage to arts and letters. Although they fought amongst themselves, provided stable conditions of life over large areas. अच्छा अच्छा, अगर fought amongst themselves हुआ तो stable conditions of life over large areas कैसे हुआ? And gave patronage to arts and letters. Okay, maybe they were fighting in the Kurukshetra in a separate war region. That might be possible. During the 8th and 9th centuries, many Indian scholars went with embassies to the court of the Caliphate Baghdad. The kingdom was founded by Danti Durga, who fixed his capital at Manya Khet or Malkhet near modern Sholapur. Okay. These sentences are one after the other. That's why it's a problem. Okay, then. He, the king, sat in a magnificent darbar. The infantry and cavalry were stationed in the courtyard. The court was not only a center of political affairs and of justice, but of cultural life as well. Dancing girls and skilled musicians attended the court. Thinkers of the time emphasized absolute loyalty and obedience to the king because of the insecurity of the times. While kings strove to maintain law and order within their kingdoms, their arms rarely extended far enough. Elephants were supposed to be elements of strength and were greatly prized. The regular troops were often hereditary and sometimes drawn from different regions all over India. When called upon, sometimes a son of the vassal chiefs was required to stay in attendance of the overlord to guard against rebellion. The Visyapatis and these smaller chiefs tended to merge with each other, and later on the word Samanta began to be used indiscriminately for both of them. It seems that their main purpose was the realization of land revenue and some attention to law and order. But he did have the general duty of protecting Brahmanas and the division of society into 4 states of Varnas. This really meant that politics and religion were in a sense kept apart, religion being essentially a personal duty of the king. By the end of the politics and religion were apart, but religion was a personal duty of the king. By the end of the 9th century, the Cholas had defeated both the Pallavas of Kanchi and weakened the Pandyans, bringing the southern Tamil country, Tonda Mandala, under their control. In the north, Rajaraja annexed the northwestern parts of the Ganga region in northwest Karnataka and overran Vengi. Sentence construction dekho. The Venetian traveller. The Venetian traveller Marco Polo, who visited Kerala in the 13th century, says that all the soldiers in the bodyguard burnt themselves in the funeral pyre of the monarch when he died, a statement which may be, well, an exaggeration. Generally speaking, new elements as well as elements of continuity are found in every historical period, but the extent and direction of change varies. अच्छा, तो ये लिखा है तो ये बोल रहा है कि नहीं, ऐसा नहीं हो सकता है, कोई सोल्जर जाके फ्यूनरल पायर में नहीं चढ़ जाएगा, मगर जब सती के बारे में कोई लिखेगा तब बोलेगा ये देखो सती हो रहा था. Much of the trade to China was carried in Indian ships, the teak wood of Malabar, Bengal and Burma providing the base of a strong tradition of shipbuilding. Thus, growth of India's foreign trade in the area was based on a strong naval tradition, including shipbuilding and a strong navy, and the skill and enterprise of its traders. दो बार बोल दिया same चीज. Traders. An important factor in the growth of the Chinese ships was the use of a primitive mariner's compass, an invention which later traveled from China to the west. अच्छा, एक पहले बोला कि much of the trade to China was carried in Indian ship, उसके बाद बोला कि an important factor in the growth of Chinese ships was the use of primitive mariner's compass, not Burmese teak or wood, as explained just a bit earlier. As in the earlier period, women were generally considered to be mentally inferior. The Rajput organization of society had both advantages and disadvantages. One advantage was the sense of brotherhood and egalitarianism which prevailed among the Rajputs. but the same trait made it difficult to maintain discipline among them. अच्छा, अब देखो egalitarian होने से discipline का प्रॉब्लम हो गया, ये भी बोल रहा है. Okay, let's check some comments. Dark Prince is saying caste and racism both come out of the believer versus non-believer distinction. Caste means race. AIT is also tied in. Yeah, I'm glad I didn't take arts. बहुत खाइस खतरे को अखन डेकुर के तो okay, Afin is saying you should have we need to replace them and step more humans like us becoming zombies and to perhaps save zombies into becoming like us. Okay, Nihilist is saying read my comment. कहाँ है comment Nihilist का? Bro, you should make shorts out of this. Yeah, I'll make shorts out of this तो. और उसके पहले अभय बोल रहा था कि सतीश औरंगजेब को डिफेंड करते करते पागल हो गया. डार्क प्रिंस इज सेइंग मुगल्स हैड अ कोलैबोरेशन रिवॉर्ड सिस्टम, mansabdari system. This later became the Brit Riyotwari system. This is the origin of feudalism in India. No such thing in native Bharata. I see. Okay. अब सिर्फ ये पढ़ना पड़ेगा क्या, पेजेस आफ्टर पेजेस? नो आई एम नॉट रीडिंग दिस. ये पढ़ के कोई फ़ायदा नहीं है. हाँ, पेज ख़त्म हो गया. हाँ ठीक है, यहीं पे ख़त्म करते हैं गाइस. इसमें तो मीनाक्षी जी काउंटर्स भी नहीं देंगी, तो ये खामों का ये पढ़ के दिमाग हिलाने का कोई फ़ायदा नहीं है. जो गलत चीज़ें था वो हम पढ़ लिए हैं. सो tomorrow is Sunday night. I am not sure if I'll do a live stream tomorrow. Maybe I'll do. Probably I'll do. If I do, then it will be History of Indian Philosophy. My books have arrived. You can see those 3 books donated. The money was donated by a viewer, Abhinag. So hope you guys join tomorrow. If I do come, we will discuss. We will continue with the discussion of History of Indian Philosophy, Volume 1 so far, and not from the website. Finally, from the physical copy of the book. So it was great to have you guys in the middle of the night, guys. Good night. See you tomorrow, most probably, and make sure you show Satish Chandra's quotes to everyone.